so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is T.J. Inman again. T.J., it's good to see you after Hurricane Helene came in and dumped, almost 2 feet of water rain on you guys. So good to see you back up and running. And we're here to break down Indiana, Nebraska, a homecoming game at noon on Saturday on Fox. It's the big noon kickoff game as well. So how are you doing?
Yeah, it's very excited, obviously. You know, you get through the first 6 games of the season, and we talked during the offseason, hey, this schedule sets up that, 5-1, maybe 6-0 is possible. And I think so far it's gone better than our wildest imagination. The most optimistic fan. I mean, not just 6-0, but winning in dominant fashion every week.
Yeah.
And it's been incredibly impressive. You get that bye week. Players have had 2 weeks by the time the game kicks off to hear how great they are. It does not appear to me that this coaching staff is going to allow them to let that get to their heads, or that this group of players is content with being bowl eligible. That's always the first goal for Indiana football: get bowl eligible, and they have. But clearly, this group is capable of much more than just that, and I think they know it. And I expect them to be locked in and ready to go on Saturday for what's going to be a big time atmosphere.
Yeah, and you have a lot on the table, and we'll talk about it later in the season as people want to talk about the 12-team playoff. We still don't really know how it works, how people are thinking and all that stuff. Yeah, that's still on the table. Is it a realistic goal? Sure. But we still don't know the criteria they're basing teams on. There's a lot of people putting 3-loss teams in there over undefeated teams and all that stuff. But that's still on the table. And right now it's great. You check the bowl eligibility box. Now it's how many wins can you get and stack? And you have, a lot of Curtis Rourke Heisman talk. You have Kirk Cignetti on the watch list for Coach of the Year. And a lot of stuff, and all eyes are on IU now. It's how are you going to deal with the spotlight? Under previous staffs, it did not go well. We saw in 2021, it was just the bottom fell out. But I think Kirk Cignetti said it best. If you didn't listen to his podcast with Pete Yorkman on the Hoosier Connect site, he had a very interesting answer to a ridiculous question, but he turned it into a great answer.
Yeah.
Was, if you're down at halftime or ahead at halftime, he's going in calm if he's down, and he's going to choose somebody out if they're ahead. So my guess is that he's putting pedal to the metal and doing his thing and keeping this team focused. But yeah, big game, sell out. You have a 5-1 Nebraska team coming in.
Yep.
Probably the stiffest competition you've faced to date so far. But, hey, Indiana's answered the bell every single time. And, yeah, 6-0 is a possibility. But 6-0, winning each game by 17-plus points, it's probably beyond every IU's fan's wildest dream. So let's get into the game, TJ. Just your general thoughts and overview of it.
Yeah, Nebraska, I think, is the best team Indiana's played so far. I think they're obviously better than any of the non-conference opponents, certainly better than UCLA, certainly better than Maryland, and then Northwestern. I think that would be a interesting game. but I would take Nebraska to win that one.
I think
Um,
Northwestern found something with Jack Lausch, though.
they did. They did. Very, very promising player for them. And if those two played, this coming Saturday, I'm not sure what the spread would be. If it was in Lincoln, probably Nebraska by uh, 10 to 13, something like that. In Evanston, maybe it's Nebraska by like 7. But I think Nebraska is the best Indiana has played so far. Um, Very solid defense, particularly against the run. Nebraska surrendering less than 3 yards a carry, and they are still the only team in the country that has not given up a rushing touchdown. A little bit of that is, just going to be a fluke as game script is determining, who's calling what plays. But that's impressive to go 6 games without giving up a rushing touchdown. That's not meaningless. And it does mean, yes, they do have a good rush defense, particularly on the interior. Their two inside defensive tackles, very good. All Big Ten caliber players. And they're going to be a handful for Indiana's offensive line to block. Maintaining offensive balance is going to be key for Indiana. You can't go away from the run, even if it's not particularly successful. Uh, I don't have any concerns about Mike Shanahan or Kurt Signetti, having a poor game plan or anything like that. Obviously, utmost confidence in this offensive staff and their ability to figure out this problem of Nebraska's defense, particularly having 2 weeks to do it. Uh, their secondary, I think, is a little bit susceptible. If you can protect Curtis Rourke and give him time, I do think the Hoosiers will be able to have some success through the air. You look at the one game that Nebraska lost, it was to Illinois. Illinois was able to have an efficient day through the air. Not particularly huge numbers from Luke Altmaier, but their receivers did have a good day against Nebraska's defensive backs. So I think there's an opportunity for the Hoosiers receivers and for Curtis Rourke to have a good day. But you got to keep balanced on offense. Indiana currently behind only Army and Boise State in terms of rushing touchdowns. So you've got that kind of immovable object versus irresistible force type matchup of Nebraska's run defense not giving up any rushing touchdowns all year versus Indiana that has just put it in the end zone time and time again, almost as well as anybody nationally. Other side of the ball, Dylan Raiola, 5-star freshman quarterback. Uh, Savior is a bit too aggressive, but Nebraska fans have put a lot of hopes on Dylan Raiola, and he's been really solid so far. Not spectacular, but solid. I think he's had mature performances for a freshman getting thrown into the fire in a high pressure situation at Nebraska. That being said, this will be his first real intense road game. So far, his only road game at Purdue and Nebraska, that was a game in the fourth quarter.
It was 0-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
And this in a pretty good weather game, despite the hurricane conditions down in Bloomington.
Yeah, and they eventually pull away for that 28-10 win. But hard to feel great if you're Nebraska, knowing that was your only road experience so far. I'm not saying Purdue has bad crowds, but that it's not going to be quite as intense as it will be at Indiana, given the situation. Again, that's not a shot at Purdue's crowds, because generally they support their football program incredibly well, given the level of that program. But Indiana fans, I would expect, are pretty fired up for Saturday. And given the situation, I think it's the toughest road environment that Raiola will have faced thus far. He doesn't run it particularly much. It's not that he can't run. He's a decent athlete, but much like Curtis Rourke, you're not particularly worried about Raiola beating you with his legs. So if you can pressure Dylan Raiola get to him, force him into some inefficiency, some incomplete passes, limit their running game to get him into obvious passing situations, you feel good about it. I think their receivers are fine to pretty good, but Indiana does have the edge at wide receiver. I think Indiana has the edge at quarterback. Running back, we can call a wash. IU has more of them, but Nebraska does have a good stable of backs. So I think Indiana has the edge at a lot of positions that you're looking for, not by a huge margin, but I think if Indiana can stay balanced on offense and pressure Raiola, you feel good about your chances.
Yeah, and they're pretty much even. And then you get to special teams, and
True.
Nebraska is, and we talked yesterday with the Common Fan podcast, and as soon as I brought up special teams, he gave out an ugh, which was expected. They're awful on special teams. They're 4 for 9 on field goals. Their starting kicker got hurt. They're relying on a true freshman. They've allowed 3 block punts this year in 6 games. So if it's an even game, that's going to determine it. IU has been very good on special teams this year. They blocked a punt. We saw Radicic kick well up at Northwestern. James Evans is a known commodity. You got Miles Price is an aggressive punt returner in a game where a punt return can change things. And then, Solomon Van Horst is a good kick returner, although he hasn't had many opportunities and things like that. But IU's special teams have been really good. The only issue IU has had, and I think the wind played tricks on them at Northwestern, were a few of the returns on the kickoff that, maybe the ball got pushed to the other side of the field. But, that should be solved when you're not playing in 30-mile-an-hour winds off of Lake Michigan. But to me, that's the matchup that's probably going to determine the outcome of the game. Is there going to be a major error by Nebraska on special teams? They had 2 field goals blocked, I think, at Purdue, where you look up at the score, it's 0-0 at halftime. You're going, I think Buck in the radio booth asked what the weather was. It was actually sunny. Stuff like that. But yeah, it's a big game for IU. The offensive line has their work cut out for them. They did a good job against Northwestern's defensive line outside of a few plays. And that's a matchup where you can look back where Northwestern and Nebraska are very similar up front, except for, Nebraska plays a 3-man front, but skill wise and production wise, it's a lot of the same. So, you feel pretty good that IU's offense, that they haven't been stopped yet this year. So they're going to have to prove it.
Yeah. And you mentioned special teams. That definitely almost cost them that Rutgers game. And it leads me to another key here for me is red zone offense for Indiana. Nebraska's red zone defense won them that game against Rutgers. Rutgers had the ball inside of scoring territory 6 times and came away with 7 total points. If you can do that as a defense, you put yourself in an incredible position to win. It was almost blown by poor special teams and a lack of execution for Nebraska's offense, but their defense, particularly in the red zone, did a great job of bowing up and keeping Rutgers out of the end zone.
Yeah, and Rutgers dropped a sure touchdown pass.
They did. Rutgers certainly helped. They helped. Now, that's where we turn to Indiana's offense. Indiana is getting into the red zone as much as anyone in the country, more than anyone in the country. Indiana has more red zone chances than anyone nationally through 6 games. Didn't think that was the sentence we would be saying, but it's been quite a ride. Numbers are numbers, and it's a fact. They're converting those chances at a 92% clip. I mean, so
It's about
far,
90 of them being touchdowns
yeah,
or high 80s.
they've been darn near flawless in the red zone. This will be their toughest test, bar none. How they approach the red zone is going to be really interesting to me. Um, are they going to try to run it against that Nebraska front that we just talked about? Are they going to try to throw it in a condensed area, which obviously brings potential turnovers into play, but you trust your senior quarterback that's playing at a very high level, and you trust your wide receivers to make plays because they have all season. I think I'm not sure who did it in our group chat, but you know, PFF has Indiana's wide receivers graded as a unit as the best wide receiver group in the country for I think that was for major conference teams. Is that correct? Was
I
it?
think so. Yeah, that was from Nick
Okay. Yeah,
yesterday. I think it was from Power Four conferences.
okay. So the details, I might be a little shaky on that, but the bottom line is Indiana's wide receivers playing incredibly well. Particularly, it singled out the trio of Keyshawn Williams, who has been really good in the red zone, uh, and then Elijah Surratt, obviously. Uh, Waffle House living up to his nickname for sure. When you give yourself a nickname like that, you better produce, and he has done it and then some. And then Omar Cooper, singling out those guys. EJ Williams, now that he's back in the fold, a big red zone target possibly. And then, Miles Price, Miles Cross with his
Keyshawn
penchant for
Will,
making
I
incredible
mean
catches.
Keyshawn Williams too has
Right.
been a red zone machine. But
Yep.
that's what I noticed with IU's
Zach Horton maybe
offense.
gets into the mix. Um, he's been used a lot as a blocker, and has been incredibly effective. You can tell uh, whenever Kurt Signetti talks about Zach Horton, he really likes Zach Horton as a football player. Um, really likes him, and it's obvious why. I mean, he does a lot of the dirty work and as far as we can tell, doesn't do any complaining about not being super involved in the passing game um, because he wants to win. And that's
Yeah.
what's happening. And his role that he's had so far is to make catches when called upon and just be an outstanding blocker in the run game. Um, eh, but maybe this is a game that, he gets a little bit more involved in the passing game in the red zone. But um, I think that it's going to be a major key because I wouldn't think that you're just going to march up and down the field at will against Nebraska's defense. It's possible, but I'm not counting on that. So when you do get your scoring chances, it's going to be critical to do what you have all season and keep cashing them in for touchdowns.
Yeah, and speaking of that red zone offense, we've seen it in the past where they just run it 3 times into the line or 4 times into the line. Last week, you saw there were obvious. You go, okay, first down, they're going to run this or
Right.
whatever, and all of a sudden there's a play action. Guy leaks out of the backfield. You saw it against Maryland. You saw it against Northwestern,
Yep.
and it's a passing play. So I think having that balance, it's now okay. The defense has to think about the run and the pass. They could do both. And then you have a guy like Curtis Rourke who could throw a guy like Keyshawn Williams open in the end zone where he's not open at any point of that route until the end. Uh, that's why that red zone offense is so terrific. Now, did you expect them to have 40 red zone trips in the first 6 games? Probably not, because that's a ton. But they are deadly in the red zone.
Yep. Yep. Looking at Nebraska's offense, um, I mentioned the wide receiver core for Nebraska. It's a pretty balanced group. They don't have necessarily one guy that stands out at you as Maryland did or as Northwestern does, as Bryce Kurtz has continued to shine for them, and he did against Indiana. He had a nice game against the Hoosiers. But Nebraska does not have that kind of one guy. Ja'Cory Barney good freshmen. Isaiah Nayor is healthy and producing for them. Jamal Banks is their leading wideout with 21 catches. And then Nayor's a little bit more of a big play guy. Um, but then Corey Beast kind of possession receiver as far as his numbers go. But uh, it's a balanced group. I think the one thing that Indiana needs to make sure is that they do not give up those explosive plays because I don't think the Nebraska has the offense to put together a bunch of drives that are long drives. Um,
Well, not many
I
people
don't
do.
no, no, and I don't think that Nebraska will be able to keep up with Indiana's offense if you don't benefit them by having a couple of blown coverages that give them maybe, two long touchdowns. Um, that that kind of feels like if Indiana can force Nebraska to work their way down the field, that you'll be able to get them stopped before they get to the end zone. Uh, if you give them defensive points, if you give them maybe one explosive run that results in a long touchdown and one busted coverage that gives them a long pass play that results in a touchdown, all of a sudden you're looking at 14 to 21 points that Nebraska's got without having to go on those long drives. It's a different story.
Yeah.
But I don't see Nebraska being able to put together, 3 or 4 touchdown drives that are 10, 12, 14 play drives. And I do think that you need to get mid to high 20s to beat Indiana.
Yeah, let's talk about your main key to a win. Um, I'll start here. For me, I think the crowd is going to play a big key, and getting out to
Sure.
a fast start. And look, IU has not trailed this year. They're one of two teams at Army who have not trailed all year. If you could get out to a lead, get the crowd engaged, and keep them engaged throughout the game. We saw it against Maryland. They were loud throughout the game from first quarter to the final gun. Um, you're going to have a terrific home field advantage
Yep.
that should propel this team going forward. Now, look, if you fall behind and the crowd kind of gets sucked out of it, it gives Nebraska that much more confidence and an easy road to victory. But you make a few big plays and get this crowd into it and keep them into it. It's going to be a tough environment to play in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. My kind of the overall key, I'm going to go with two of them. One is the red zone offense. Number two is staying balanced on offense, which means Nebraska's run defense is going to limit you likely. You're probably not going to be able to continue to run the ball for 5 or 6 yards a carry. If you do, well, you're going to have a really good afternoon. But I would expect Nebraska to keep IU 3 to 4 yards or less. Um, but you got to stick with it and stay balanced. You don't want to get into a game where Curtis Rourke has to throw the ball, 50, 55 times. Um, he's capable of that, but I think staying balanced on offense and cashing in your opportunities that you get in the red zone is going to be key. On the other side, pressuring Dylan Raiola is my key for the defense.
Yeah, and go back to that red zone offense, those draw plays when they ran against Northwestern.
Yeah,
Again, another you think they're going to pass it, and all of a sudden they hit you with the old draw up the middle for a touchdown. It's just amazing how Mike Shanahan and Kirk Cignetti call games and keep the defense
so much fun.
off balance. So that's it's so hard to stop this offense. Let's get into predictions, TJ. What's your prediction for Saturday?
You know, I think even the most jaded of Indiana fans has to be coming around to the fact that things are different in Bloomington. Um, that doesn't mean that IU is going to go undefeated. They might, but it absolutely means that you have a level of confidence entering a toss-up game that has not been felt in my lifetime as an IU football fan, and I'm not particularly young. Um, so I do feel confident with Indiana coming into this game. I have a lot of respect for Matt Rule. I have a lot of respect for the trajectory that I think Nebraska's program is on. Um, I think they're building something sustainable there that they should feel really good moving forward. They're easily going to be a bowl team, which they have not been to a bowl game since 2016. They have a chance to become bowl eligible on Saturday. Uh, I don't think they're going to get there this Saturday. Um, I think Indiana's going to come out, play really well, and win this one. And I do think IU's offense continues to produce. I'm going to go with the Hoosiers winning this one 34-21.
Ooh, it's a little higher scoring than I would think. But yeah, we haven't seen we've seen IU play their A game and they look unstoppable. We've seen IU play their B and maybe a C plus game if you're a hard grader and still win by multiple touchdowns.
Sure.
Not the whole game, but defense struggled in the first half against Northwestern, offense struggled first half against Maryland, and
Turnovers.
IU has overcome all of that. I'm going to take IU 31, Nebraska 20, which I know you could take that 20 how you want it. Either they're going to miss an extra point or kick a field goal.
Yeah.
But I would probably bet on missing the extra point than kicking 2 field goals. But I think IU, we haven't seen that letdown yet, and it might not come because Kirk Cignetti prevents it. But they're on a mission this year, and look, they could go undefeated this year. And all you have to do is play your A game. If somebody beats you and you play your A game, there's really nothing you could do. But if
which
IU
could
plays,
happen, if Indiana plays their A game tomorrow, or I'm sorry, on Saturday, who wins?
IU, I even
Yep,
think if Nebraska plays their A game, I still think IU wins. It might be
exactly.
closer than 31-20, but if they both play up to their capabilities, I still think IU wins. Um,
Exactly.
and I still think IU would win playing their B game. But 2 weeks to prepare. Kirk Cignetti's really good off the bye as well. You're going to get you hopefully get Jalen Walker back on defense. It sounds like he'll be back according to
Yep.
Kirk Cignetti. But yeah, 31-20, happy homecoming, happy crowd. And you go into next week against Washington at 7-0 with all these possibilities in front of you. So yeah,
Yep.
that's going to wrap it up. Final thoughts, TJ?
Really exciting time. You mentioned all the pregame pomp and circumstance that's happening. Um, the potentially really cool environment and atmosphere that's going to be in Bloomington on Saturday, leading up to the game and then during the game. So really exciting time. Of course, none of that matters once the ball gets kicked off. Uh, and from there, I just have a level of comfort that this coaching staff and this group of players will be ready. Um, I think that they're going to be locked in and ready. And if that happens, then I think they play really well. And if they play really well, then I feel like they're better than Nebraska is. Um, so looking forward to it. Obviously, as we start, the players aren't allowed to do this, the coaches aren't allowed to do this, but we are. We're fans. You start to glance ahead a little bit. Um, you can start to sort of check off boxes as far as, okay, we are at least at this bowl game level. And we're at least at this bowl game level. Right now, we know we're going bowling. Great. A win over Nebraska pushes you up just another tier. It gets you into the top 15 probably, right? I would think.
Yes, maybe.
Given results elsewhere, who knows? But I would think you'd be right there with another home game right after that. So the table is set, and you can really start to dream big with a win over Nebraska.
Yeah, you got 3 weeks until the college football playoff rankings come out, and you continue to stack wins. You could
Right.
start thinking about now. I don't want to talk playoff because you don't know what this committee is going to do yet.
No.
And until they come out and do it the first time, then you can say, okay, well, IU has to be at such and such a level, uh,
Yeah.
probably in the top 11 to get considered. Uh,
Yeah.
then yeah, I'm not poo-pooing the playoff. I need more information on what they're basing this off of, because there are people who are like, throw a 3-loss Georgia team in at 5 and give them an easy path to the championship. It's like, okay, what are we doing? But it should be a great atmosphere. You have big noon kickoff on the South End Zone Plaza. They're starting at 10 a.m. I think gates open, or whatever they have open, at 8 a.m. There's a lot of giveaways for students as well. Of course, uh, if the pregame show is not your thing, you could always head to upstairs for Breakfast Club. They have a ton of stuff going on for homecoming this week as well. Hit up Breakfast Club. It's going to be a beautiful day too, so enjoy the walk up Woodlawn from Kirkwood to the game, and just enjoy it. It's 75 or 73, little breeze and sunshine, so absolutely perfect day. Chamber of Commerce day for homecoming, and yeah, IU's got to start fast, and I think they've done that under this coaching staff. With they don't come out and fumble the ball on the first play and stuff like that. They have yet to let up a score on their first drive on defense. I think the only negative that you have at the beginning of the game is that you're 1-5 on coin tosses.
Got to
But
do better. Got to
yeah,
do better. Come on.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to employ get a soothsayer on the staff and see if we can start getting some better coin toss predicting skills.
Well, finite math is all about probability, right? So can we get one of those professors who have held back so many transfers to come in and
Yeah,
actually help the
I think
football team this time?
yeah, I do think they owe the football program, a couple of coin toss wins. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have all our pregame stuff from TJ and the rest of the group on HoosierHuddle.com. You can follow us at Hoosier_Huddle as well. Also, big recruiting weekend in Bloomington. So keep an eye on social media. Ton of recruits down in Bloomington. Again, have a safe homecoming, have a good homecoming, and hopefully we'll be back next week talking about a 7-0 Indiana team.